Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast with me, Ayo Akinwolere. Crystal Palace are battling to keep their Europa League place, while Lyon have been relegated to French football's second tier. John Textor and his Eagle football group had stakes in both clubs last season. So is this multi-club ownership model to blame? All right, so here with us today, we have our senior football news reporter, Matt Slater. We've also got Matt Woosnam, Crystal Palace correspondent, and Tom Williams, our French football writer as well. Matt, the name John Textor, it's back again. And also back in November, you reported how Lyon were at threat of being relegated from France's Ligue 1 by the DNCG, the body that regulates the finances of French clubs. And this morning, John Textor has resigned from his leadership position at Lyon, with Michelle Kang taking over as chairwoman and president. Whew, let's get that out of the way. How did we get here?
Yeah, today's John Textor news. Amazing. This man is just a gift. I love this bloke. Yeah, how do we get here? Well, you've outlined, the timeline-ish in your question. So, Lyon, big club. Tom's going to talk all about how big they are. In November, DNCG. Bit of a mouthful, that one. I won't tell you what it stands for. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. Is the financial watchdog, French football. They've got a little standalone body. It's quite clever. John Textor wouldn't agree with that last comment. But anyway, it only looks at solvency of football clubs. The French have a slightly unusual system. They're not like UEFA, not like the Premier League. They don't have, if you like, kind of a set approach to financial fair play. They're not looking at, for example, a allowable loss threshold like we talk about. They're not looking at a squad cost ratio like UEFA does. They care about solvency. So what they do is they do an assessment of each club as a going concern. Now, when people read the financial accounts of football clubs like I do, you'll sort of see in the auditor speak at the front of the accounts an assessment by an auditor that this business is a going concern. It can pay its bills as they come for a year. And they say, yay or nay, I'm quite happy to put my professional reputation on the line here and say this company is a going concern. Sometimes they will say, this is a loss-making business, and we've had a word with the owners of this business, and they have agreed. They have committed to fund the differences. And you'll often sort of see a note about that. Sometimes an auditor might say, there's a material uncertainty here. I am a little bit concerned that this business is losing too much money, has too much debt, but I'm going to sort of put a little kind of rider there just to sort of cover myself. The DNCG sort of does that privately. It kind of gets all the clubs in and says, what's going in, what's going out? We want to see you cover that gap now. We want to see either you putting money in or a plan, something as good as money, a letter, very, very tight letter from a lawyer, from a bank, some sort of plan that you're going to sell an asset. They're actually a little bit kind of strict on that. They don't like player trading stuff because that's a bit, could happen, might not. And this is the issue that John Textor's got into. So this started in November, as you pointed out. They didn't like it. The assessment was bad. And they provisionally relegated Lyon. That was huge. For a club of, that big. We've had this before. The NCG they do intervene. They have teeth. Texas said there's no problem here. They just misunderstand my business model, which we're going to get into. I'm a multi-club. They're not seeing the complexity. All right, this bit of the business I can see there might be a flashing light, but it's okay because that's not how multi-club models work. Going to source it all out. I'm a player trading genius. Look how good Brazil is. We can sort this really, really quickly. They got into a 3, 4, 5 month, whatever it is, conversation. They had another meeting late May. Textor thought that went well. He had a plan. It's really complicated. There's some bits that I've sort of agreed not to share yet. He may well share it in time. He had a plan that the DNCG liked. Some of it was, basically writing a check. Some of it was shuffling some money around. He didn't quite deliver on the plan, to be fair. He has an explanation for why he didn't quite go through with what he agreed with them in May. He's pointing out that his second plan B, plan C, whatever it was, is just as good, and they just don't get it. They just don't understand it, which is why they're going to go to an appeal and why he's going to, argue the case all over again. This might not be over, but it is fair, and I think he acknowledges this now, that what he said he'd do in May, he didn't quite do, which is why he goes to June 24th, and he's stunned. He's absolutely devastated. I know Matt's spoken to him several times, and he didn't see that coming. Very, very quick hearing. It was, no, you said you'd do this in May and you didn't do it. So that provisional relegation is now activated. So that's where we're at. And it's thrown the John Textor football empire, the experiment, the project, completely up in the air.
Yeah, what about Lyon then, Tom? Big club in France, right? Like, I mean, how many Ligue 1 titles did they win between 2001 to 2008? I think it was something like 7. You think about the talent that's come out of that club. You think about the managers that have come out of that club. I even remember there was an Intertoto trophy at some point back in the day. I mean, this is a huge club. How has this been received in France?
There's been a huge amount of anger. There's been a huge amount of shock as well. Because, as Matt was just saying, they've had this hanging over them since November. And when the DNCG announced Lyon's provisional relegation in November, there was huge surprise. I mean, for a club of that size, particularly a club that owns its own stadium, a club that owns its own training facilities, that had been a model of good governance for decades under Jean-Michel Aulas, to find itself in that kind of position was a real shock. But people said to themselves, well, he's got time to sort this out. So, surely by the time we get to the end of the season, this will be okay. On the morning of the fateful hearing, and Matt mentioned on June 24th, the headline in L'Equipe was, John Textor very confident. They've had time to sort things out. The expectation is that Lyon are going to be all right. So Lyon fans were reassured, were optimistic. They thought that, they had this warning and, they were going to get out of it okay. And as it turned out, no. There was this fear that they might end up in Ligue, but I think a lot of fans didn't really think that was a possibility. And now that's where they are. So there's been a lot of shock and a lot of anger. I mean, you look at the way that, Lyon's fans have reacted. There have been, Textor resign banners, displayed, in front of various Lyon landmarks. There was a big supporter protest outside the stadium on Saturday. About 1,000 fans turned up. There were speeches and flares set off and things like that. And then within, the sort of French football fraternity, a lot of criticism. Sidney Govou, who's like one of the great Lyon players of that, the 7 consecutive titles era. He said, this guy's pulled the wool over our eyes. Right from the start, he said things and he hasn't backed them up. And every time he's backed into a corner, he just sells more, attractive visions of how he's going to turn things around. And we're idiots for having believed him. Yeah, that's been the kind of general reaction. So yeah, anger, shock, and I think sadness as well. The fact that you have this historic club, Lyon have been Ligue 1 perennials since they came up under Jean-Michel Aulas in 1989. Generally speaking, they've always been in contention for European football. I mean, they haven't competed for the title for a few years now, but they're generally a kind of a top 4, top 5 team. They had been starting to slide in recent years, and that predates Textor's arrival, but they're still one of the biggest clubs in the country. So yeah, it feels like a real hammer blow for Lyon, but also for French football as a whole.
Yeah, Matt, let's bring you in here because, I'm interested to hear or get a sense of what Textor feels about it all, because back in November, upon the initial ruling, he stated that there'd be no chance that they'd be relegated. Well, sorry, sir. It looks like it might actually happen.
Yeah, I think surprise is probably the reaction from Textor. I think it was a shock to him as much as Tom was saying to the fans. I think he was always confident. I think, he is the ultimate optimist. He believes that everything will be okay. He believes in his plan and how he's going to operate. And he thinks that that's going to work. And obviously, in this case, it hasn't. And I think he went into that meeting, into that hearing with the DNCG, full of optimism. Obviously, Botafogo, his other club, doing really well in the Club World Cup, now knocked out. But at the time, we're doing well in the Club World Cup, have beaten, albeit a weakened PSG side. And I think he was kind of on a high, and he had confidence that everything would be okay. But actually, I think he's been very surprised, especially after UEFA. It came, I think the following day, UEFA formally confirmed that they had passed the sufficient checks for UEFA to get into Europa League in that sense. Although that is now subject to issues, which I think Matt will probably go on to, about whether or not they can actually play in the Europa League, which potentially has knock-on impact for Palace. But he didn't. I think he found it hard to sort of understand why UEFA would pass them, but the DNCG wouldn't. So, surprise, shock. As I say, he went in confident, and he's always been confident. He's always been optimistic, and that is the John Textor way. And sometimes it works, but this time it didn't.
Yeah, definitely want to talk about the impact on Palace a little later on, gents. But very quickly on Lyon trying to raise funds in this regard. What can they do in such a small space of time? I mean, I think I read something about PSG trying to pay the fee for Bradley Barcola in advance just to help them out. I mean, are we seeing allyship here between PSG and Lyon?
Yeah, that's been one of the surprising developments this season, is that Nasser Al-Khelaifi, the PSG president, and John Textor, who were at complete loggerheads a year ago. Those of us who've seen footage of that infamous Zoom call between all the Ligue presidents, won't forget it in a hurry. And Textor is one of the few people who sort of dares to go toe to toe with Al-Khelaifi. And that has, prior to Lyon finding themselves in their current situation, earned him a degree of respect in France. And there has been a rapprochement of late. Textor was invited to, I think it was one of the Champions League games against Arsenal, as a guest of Al-Khelaifi's. And Textor inevitably, made a big fuss about that. And there were pictures on social media and things like that. And I think it was a sign that Al-Khelaifi realizes that, as much as he has found Textor quite annoying and quite an unpleasant adversary, French football is stronger with a strong Lyon, and I think that's been part of his thinking. And there have been these reports, notably by RMC Sport, that in response to Lyon's relegation being confirmed, PSG have agreed to pay the fee for Bradley Barcola in full, rather than to pay it over the course of his contract, as was agreed when he first signed the deal. So that's a sign of the goodwill that there is towards Lyon within French football, but also a sign of the state of panic that Lyon kind of find themselves in. And there's an awful lot that we still don't know about this punishment. The details behind the decision have not been widely reported on yet. The expectation is that that Lyon will be scrambling to try and raise funds, but we're only 6 weeks out from next season. They have an appeal that they are putting together, an appeal that will go, to the DNCG, and then if that's unsuccessful, they would have to go via the French Olympic Committee, and then if that's unsuccessful, they're having to go through the courts. So an awful lot of things up in the air at the moment. I mean, Ligue 1, the LFP, which is the body that runs France's professional leagues, they released the fixtures the other day, and Lyon were included in the Ligue 1 fixtures. So that even at that level, there's this, there's this complete, sense of flux, and of uncertainty. And until Lyon can submit that appeal, and until it's looked at, we don't know what the outcome will be.
Yeah, of course, they've already sold Ryan Cherky to Manchester City, and I think Malik Fofana also has been attracting interest from Chelsea. Matt, I'm just thinking about this. Nothing screams clubs in crisis more than this one, right? I mean, we've done a series on this kind of stuff already, but it's really fascinating when it comes to Ligue 1, because I think about Bordeaux. You know, there have been some casualties when it comes to administrative issues with clubs. I mean, isn't so unprecedented in Ligue 1, is it?
No, Ayo Akinwolere as well. They got 2 relegations. They actually managed to halve that on appeal. Like I said, DNCG has teeth. Does this. The picture is fuzzy. It does appear that the November requirement was you're effectively, as far as we're concerned, DNCG, we're looking at your numbers. We think you're 50 million euros short. So Textor was like indignant. What are you talking about? Again, you just don't understand my business model. All right, fine. I can get you 50 million euros. Because as Matt Woosnam sort of mentions, John Textor, whenever he talks about anything, so, oh yeah, it's fine. No problem at all. Money's no problem. And even right now, he's saying we've got loads of cash. I just can't believe these people. They can't see how much cash we've got. We've got more cash than we need. He's the sort of guy that literally cash is a bit of a problem. He has to spend. He has to grow. He's a born capitalist, a committed entrepreneur. Cash is to use, not to sit around to satisfy an accountant. That's a waste of cash. So he's saying, hold on a minute, DNCG, I've just sold at quite a good price, though he'll tell you he could have got more, but he's being a hero. Got quite a good price for my shares at Crystal Palace. That money's coming pretty soon. That's going to sail through. Woozy can talk about that. Just sold Cherky. Yeah, I may well sell another player. I don't need to, obviously, because I'm in complete control. I'm the captain of my own fate. Botafogo going pretty well in the Club World Cup. We're doing okay for cash. And I sort of alluded to in my first answer, he has gone round to the shareholders and said, we might have to put our hands in our pocket here. He says that he was willing to do that and committed to do that. Michelle Kang, who I think we're going to say a little bit more about. Michelle Kang is a billionaire, massive investor in women's football. She has bought half of OL's women's team, fantastic women's team, still successful. So she's around the table at Eagle. She's a shareholder in Eagle. She's been willing to write a check. Where things got a little bit complicated for him between that May meeting and the June meeting, and this, of course, again goes to everything in Textor's life, everything in Textor's business is complicated. He is constantly spinning plates and he's got issues with other shareholders. So again, I don't want to throw too many names and make this more complicated than it already is. But Eagle Football, the big parent group that did own a great big chunk of Palace, owns most of Lyon, owns Botafogo and owns R&D Molenbeek that he's trying to call Daring Brussels. He borrowed a load of money to buy Lyon from Ares, a big financial firm in the States. $425 million. They have been unhappy with him for a while. They wanted some of that money back. So most of the Palace money will go straight to Ares. He's been telling DNCG, and I think this is kind of true, to be honest, that he can use a little bit, probably about $40-50 million, if DNCG want more equity. So it is quite interesting, this sort of Barkler idea. This is, I think, very much for the papers. I think this is very much, pieces broken out. I think Tom's points around Nasser Al-Khelaifi realising that we need Lyon, because one of the big issues in French football for about the last 3-4 years is their TV deal. They are all struggling. The DNCG has been talking to all the clubs about putting more equity in because they are very, very nervous about this TV deal, which is at the moment is just almost non-existent. It's rubbish. So imagine taking a big club like Lyon off the table, as well as the matchday revenue. So that's everyone is looking at their books going, we kind of need Lyon there. We don't want them relegated. So that's what Matt Barkler situation is about. The actual money that Eagle may or may not need to put into DCG for DNCG, which they do, it got complicated because of this Ares issue. Ares were not happy about Textor and Kang putting more equity in because it kind of knocked them down the pecking order within Eagle. They were like, hold on, we're owed a lot of money here. We need to be first to the queue. There's another issue to do with another potential investor, which is way too complicated, so I'm not even going to go there. The point is that Textor is very confident in his own abilities to find money. And he does appear to be able to do it. Every time he's challenged, he does come up with a new name, a new potential investor, or a new lender. He's good. He's a good salesman. There are a lot of people in America who are willing to lend John Textor money. So he does sort of get into these scrapes and then kind of get out of them, but he kind of upsets people along the way. It is always a little bit kind of 11th hour, and it is complicated. His story gets more and more complicated. And I think the NCG have just got fed up. And just the last point I'll make is what's been confirmed today is that he is stepping away from Lyon. And he's doing that because I think he's admitted he's terrible at French football politics. He cannot do it. He's become the problem. So he's going to put Michelle Kang in there, who's very respected. You know, she's running the women's team. She's got lots of money. She has some skin in the game, so that's good. And he's also, as kind of chief executive, slightly different title, but is Michael Gerlinger, who spent a long time working at Bayern Munich, was quite senior at the European Club Association. So again, there's that connection with Nasser Al-Khelaifi, which runs the European Club Association. He's a very well-respected person in European football. And Textor is basically going to he's going to step away, create real distance between himself and Lyon. Those people are going to do the French politics. Those people are going to run that club. I'm going to concentrate on Eagle football. And one last point I'll make, and this is again, will not endear him to Lyon fans. I think it's him saying, Botafogo are my number one club.
Interesting. Well, let's get into it. Let's discuss John Textor's role in Lyon's demise, but also what this means for his role at Crystal Palace as well. Yeah, Tom, Lyon, as you reference, will appeal the relegation that the DNCG have already handed down. Now, this will be without Textor, and as Matt has alluded to, this could be really fascinating, that he has resigned from his leadership role at Lyon. What impact do you think him resigning this morning will have on that club?
Well, I think in the short term, it will probably give people a bit of a lift. I think that the fans in particular have been calling for him to resign for a little while now. So it will bring a bit of peace to the club. But, everything depends on the outcome of this appeal. If Lyon win the appeal, then, Textor will perhaps be seen to have, contributed to, to that success by falling on his sword, and leaving the way clear for Michelle Kang and Michael Gerlinger to lead that appeal. If Lyon don't win that appeal, then, Textor stepping away will be seen as a kind of a fruitless gesture, really. Everything ultimately at Lyon boils down to what comes of the appeal. I think, looking at Textor more widely, I think that the damage that this has done to his reputation in French football, is probably unsurvivable, in the sense that, all along there's been a sort of suspension of disbelief with Textor because of the way he works. He's got a different way of operating, as Matt was saying. And he tells you what you want to hear and he sells you things. And all along, Lyon fans have had doubts and had concerns, and they're not used to their club, finding itself in this sort of position. Under Jean-Michel Aulas's tenure, which was, 36 years, they never had any kind of scrapes like this with the DNCG. They were seen as a model club, really, and people applauded the fact that despite not having, wealthy benefactors, they were able to still occasionally, ruffle PSG's feathers. And so there was just this hope that, with Textor coming in, he would be able to kind of take them to the next level. And that obviously, is not what has happened. So, difficult for him to to bounce back from this in any way. I think the hope has to be that Lyon win the appeal, and that then with Kang and Gerlinger in charge, they can then start to project forward and start making plans for the future. But yeah, ultimately everything is going to come down to what happens with this appeal.
Yeah, Matt, you spoke about Botafogo earlier, and also, the position in Texas Eagle Football Group. I'm just wondering what his big dream has been with this sort of multi-club model, and whether or not it's actually worked for Lyon. Because I think I read recently that that there's an idea that he wanted to share players and share the wealth from Brazil, put it into Lyon, put it into Crystal Palace, whatnot. Has it actually worked? Like, can we say this multi-club model of his idea mentally has actually worked?
This is it. This is the question, right? So OL fans will say categorically not. Okay, there has been, look, to be fair to John Textor, he is a committed and sincere believer in the multi-club model, and there are very few people that are trying to run it. The idea, you sort of save costs, you have multiple footprints, you create pathways for your players, you create shop windows, there's no leakage of players when out of contracts, when they go to other teams, because you have this family, you can create this. These are all the buzzwords, right? He genuinely believes this is the way. This is how football should be run. There's sort of some sound economic logic to it. Unfortunately, it is just a theory, and I constantly sort of thinking to myself about which multi-club group is actually making money and or sort of winning, and it's all very questionable. I mean, City Football Group's the obvious one, but they have a sovereign wealth fund behind them, and they lose pots of money. And Man City do well, the rest of them occasionally do well, but not all of them. And then you've got Red Bull. Now, Red Bull is a great big marketing exercise. Yeah, they've had a lot of success. They've ruffled a lot of feathers. They've upset a lot of fans in Germany in particular. They do have a very, very clearly defined style of play. They have a lot of success in player trading. They are the ones that nearly all the other multi-club models kind of look at and aspire to. But it is part of Red Bull's marketing budget. So it's quite hard, because they don't reveal all their numbers, to get a sense of, is it breaking even? Is it close to breaking even? Because that would be fine, because like I said, they're trying to sell drinks. So those are the two. All the other multi-club groups are, experiments. And, Textor's been running this one. The thing that really winds up Lyon fans, and this goes back to the Jean-Michel Aulas and the club he built there, they were textbook. They invested in their stadium. They invested in their training ground. They had a really, I'll let Tom do the list of ex-Lyon players, Benzema, etc. Fantastic, right? They had a women's team. They were ahead of the curve on so many ways. They then bought an arena, right, to create footfall and to have another revenue stream. Guess what Textor's done with most of this stuff? He sold it. He sold it. So OL fans just see this guy take them over and then asset strip them. He sold half the successful women's team to Michelle Kang. They had an offshoot in the NWSL in the States, OL Reign. He sold that. He sells the arena that is making money. OL is a listed company, so you get loads of financial data on OL. He sold the arena back to Jean-Michel Aulas. He knows which bits of OL are making money. So OL fans are looking at, well, we used to have all this, and now we appear to have a lot less. Oh, and by the way, Botafogo are doing really well. And that's where the money flows. And OL fans are doing their own sums and saying, well, we've been bumping along. Okay, they almost got relegated a year and a half ago. And okay, he turned the season around and they had a great surge. So they're sort of saying, well, we've had a little bit of austerity. We've had a little bit of kind of selling stuff. Botafogo, who were not one of the big Brazilian giants, he's thrown money at Botafogo. They had, again, we have to be fair to John Textor, they had an incredible season ago, where they not only won the Brazilian title, they won the Libertadores. They're at the Club World Cup on merit. They absolutely ruffled the feathers and shook Brazilian football up. So he can sort of point to Botafogo and say, there is my proof of concept. That is how multi-clubs work, right? Yes, money flows round and you have to, whoa, over here, whoa. It's all a bit, whoa. And players are going backwards and forwards. But he can say, I did it at Botafogo. Oh, well, Palace, as Woozy will tell us, it didn't really have much to do at Palace. And Molenbeek, God knows what he's doing at Molenbeek. But anyway, so that's the story.
Come on, Matt Woosnam, talk to me. Let's already start opening up this Pandora's box that is Crystal Palace and John Textor. How has his tenure and involvement at Palace been? Because obviously we've heard the issues with Lyon and how those fans feel about him, but what about the Palace fans?
Ultimately, it's culminated in an agonising wait to find out whether Palace will be playing in Europe next season, or Europa League rather. I think everyone is desperately waiting to hear whether they will be. But if we go back to when John Textor arrived, I mean, he came in hoping to buy a majority of Palace and actually take over Palace and have a controlling stake in Palace. And he was convinced otherwise by Steve Parish, perhaps, or for some reason he didn't end up buying a majority, and he only took a 40% stake, hoping then to subsequently increase his stake through various means over time, through capital calls, which has happened, but hoping to increase his stake to become a controlling majority. And I think we can trace things back to that decision not to buy a controlling stake in Palace to what's happening now, with the Europa League. I mean, it's certainly not been plain sailing for him at Palace, even though he doesn't have particularly very much influence whatsoever. I mean, he had some involvement in the appointment of Oliver Glasner as manager. I'm sure that Steve Parish and the other owners would say, we knew Oliver Glasner was an excellent manager. We liked him. We were going to hire him anyway. I imagine that's the argument that they made to UEFA when they met. The four owners met UEFA at Lyon when they were arguing that Textor doesn't have decisive influence over matters at Palace. It hasn't gone down well for him with the fans. I mean, this guy who comes in and disrupts things, that's effectively what he's done, is disrupted things in the way that he wants to operate. Parish has been there since 2010. He's been a great custodian for the club. He's presided over the most successful period of their history, and the last 15 years have been fantastic for the club. The other owners, Josh Harris and David Blitzer, fellow American businessmen, they're effectively silent partners. They don't really come out and speak in public. They're very quiet, whereas Textor comes in and suddenly he's saying all of these things and he's speaking and he's putting out these statements, and I think Palace fans didn't like that, and a lot of them don't like that. I mean, there were protests against him from the Homesdale Fanatics, Palace's ultras group, and I think a lot of Palace fans were behind those protests. Although I think he would argue that there are also privately a lot of people who come to him. This is his argument, is that people come to him privately and say, actually, we like you, think you're helping or doing a good job or whatever. So it hasn't really gone well for him at Palace, but it all boils down to how much influence he has. He's one of four general partners. Palace's ownership structure is complicated, but effectively there are four owners who, regardless of their stakes in the club, have 25% voting rights each. So they get an equal say in how the club is run. But typically, Parish, Harris, and Blitzer are the ones who all agree with each other, and Textor tends to be the outsider here. Textor has said Palace is not a perfect fit for Eagle. He can't use his multi-club in the same way at Palace as he did in Lyon and Botafogo, and this is partly why he is selling, he's in the process of selling his 43% or Eagle's 43% stake in Palace to the New York Jets owner, Woody Johnson. That decision has actually gone down well with Palace fans. Woody Johnson is clearly a very unpopular owner at the Jets, but I think Palace fans are quite happy to see the back of Textor. If you were to say what is the abiding sort of feeling towards Textor at Palace, I think the word is anger. I think people are really angry at Textor at Palace, at least from what I can see publicly. And, I don't hear this from anyone. I don't hear anything otherwise, anything to contradict that privately from people that I know who are Palace fans. No one is coming to me and saying, actually, we think Textor's done brilliant for Palace. I don't hear that. I just hear all of this anger, especially, Palace won the FA Cup, and I can't even, overstate how big an achievement that was for Palace and how much their fans absolutely, are still reveling in it. I think it was 7 weeks on, and they're still acting as if it was yesterday, and rightly so. Their first major trophy in their history. They qualify for Europe, and the other aspect of this is that I think it was 1990 or 91, sorry. Palace were denied entry to Europe because of Liverpool being reinstated early from their ban after the Heysel. English clubs were banned after the Heysel disaster. So it's history. It would be history repeating itself. And for those who remember that time, again, that anger will just be even more palpable. So if Palace are denied Europe because of John Textor having decisive influence at Palace, then the fury is going to be off the charts. And as much as he might say that there are people who come to him privately and say, well done, or we like you, that's not what I'm seeing publicly.
Tom, please just give us a sense of how damaging this could be for the French league. Matt spoke about that TV deal and how Ligue 1 really needs eyes on it. But let's say Lyon lose this appeal. I mean, this is a team that's produced the likes of Lacazette, Benzema, Samuel Titi. I mean, this could be really huge if Lyon go down.
Yeah, I mean, they would leave an enormous gap. It would be good news for Reims because they would no longer be relegated. It would be good news for Strasbourg and Lens. Strasbourg, who would go into the Europa League in Lyon's place, and Lens, who would take Strasbourg's place in the Conference League. But yeah, there are very few clubs in France that have the appeal that Lyon have, that have the history that Lyon have. And I think, particularly in the context of the current moment, as Matt Slater was saying before, we find ourselves once again in the grip of another Ligue 1 TV rights fiasco. And ironically, that the clubs have agreed that they're going to set up their own channel. And one of the few people who was banging the drum for this when it came up as an idea last summer was John Textor. The vast majority of the other Ligue 1 presidents weren't interested, said, no, we're going to go with a more traditional model with like a main broadcaster. And they went with DAZN. That didn't work out. And so they've gone back to the drawing board. And a consequence of that is that the DNCG, there they are again, instructed, French clubs that when they put their budgets together for the forthcoming season, 2025-26, they couldn't include any TV revenue whatsoever because no one knows how much TV revenue there's going to be. And we still don't know, this new TV channel is in the steps of being put together, but there's still an awful lot of uncertainty about what it's going to look like, about how much it's going to cost for subscribers, and bottom line, how much money it's going to generate for French clubs. So, French clubs are desperate for any kind of good news at the moment. And, there are bits of good news. PSG are the European champions. Marseille are back in the Champions League, and look like they're going places. Paul Pogba is going to be playing in Ligue 1 for the first time ever, having signed for Monaco. And so there are all these, these kind of green shoots and signs that things might be about to take a turn and go better. And then you get something like Lyon being relegated, which would just be, enormous. And for the last sort of, 10, 15, 20 years probably, along with PSG and Marseille and Monaco, they have been one of the big achievers, one of the real drivers, and not just domestically, in Europe as well. And although they haven't won Ligue 1 since 2008, they've reached 2 Champions League semi-finals since then. And ironically, they've done so at times when, things weren't always going all that well domestically. So that they're a club who have managed to put French football in the spotlight And, you know, simultaneously producing all these wonderful footballers. I mean, you know, the list is ridiculous. The players who've come through that Lyon academy. You know, what would that mean for the club's ability to attract players? If, you know, the suspicion is that if Lyon were to find themselves in Ligue 2, they'd bounce back straight away. But, you know, you never know. So, yeah, it would be an enormous blow for French football, and at exactly the wrong kind of time, because French football is just desperate for positivity, is desperate for people to carry on watching, watching Ligue 1. And, you know, you lose Lyon and you lose a not insignificant part of that audience and that market.
Yeah, let's wind it up there, gents. I really appreciate your time, and Palace fans, I'm praying you get to taste European football next season. Matt, both of you, Woosnam, and also Slater, and also Tom Williams. Thanks for watching, guys, and also don't forget to like the video and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and also drop us a comment as well. That's it for now. We'll catch you soon. If you want to watch more episodes of the show, please subscribe to the channel. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season. If you'd like to listen to the episodes in full in audio form, search The Athletic FC wherever you get your podcasts from.